They didn't bark, they marched. Trained as soldiers, armed with fangs. You've never heard of them, and perhaps that's exactly why this story needs to be told. Rome had an army of war dogs. Not myths-facts. Dogs that faced lions, protected generals, and died as heroes. The most powerful empire in the world entrusted its rear to them. And today, you'll understand why. But get ready, this story has no happy ending. It holds a forgotten truth, and it starts now. Imagine walking along a Roman road at dusk. Soldiers march in silence. Banners flutter in the wind. And among the ranks, watchful eyes and keen sniffers move dogs. They weren't mere animals. They were companions, sentinels, four-legged soldiers. In ancient Rome, the dog was not only valued, he was respected and honored. Since the days of the Republic, the Romans had recognized their worth, not just as hunters and guardians, but as an integral part of daily life, and eventually of war. Among these dogs, one breed stood out, Canis Pugnax, a true canine titan, forged for combat. Inheriting the strength of the Greek Molossus, this now extinct breed was born to guard, protect, and confront. With thick fur, powerful musculature, and unwavering courage, these dogs didn't just live alongside legionnaires, they fought with them. And their loyalty was legendary. Even when their masters fell in battle, they stood their ground defending them until their final breath. Canis Pugnax didn't come about by accident. It was the result of carefully selected crossbreeding between Molossian dogs, originally from Greece and other local breeds. The Molossians, giants with dense fur and an unyielding spirit, were already known for guarding cattle, villages, and caravans in mountainous regions. And when they arrived in Rome, the Romans saw in these dogs more than just protectors, they saw warriors. So, they created their own lineage of dogs to serve as personal guards for camp surveillance. And of course, for the blood-soaked arenas, these dogs weren't just big, they were immense. Standing about 60 centimeters tall and weighing between 40 to 50 kilograms of pure muscle. Their barks echoed like thunder. Black, strong, loyal to the death. They obeyed commands like true legionaries, and unlike barbarian dogs, which attacked indiscriminately, the Canis Pugnax were trained with precision. They could recognize armor, scent, voice, and even hand gestures, as if they were soldiers made not of flesh and blood, but of discipline and instinct. If this part of the story impressed you, just imagine what's still to come. And if you value rare stories, those hidden in the folds of forgotten history, you're in for something truly special. If you've made it this far into the shadows of time, then you're part of a legion that thinks differently. Show that you're with us. Leave a like now. This isn't just a click. It's your way of saying, I want more stories like this. And if you're not already subscribed, sign up now and activate the bell. Because here, we unearth the past with the strength of a Canis Pugnax, and you won't want to miss the next battle in history. Now, let's continue. The use of dogs in warfare wasn't invented by the Romans. The Gauls, Germans, and Greeks had already used dogs in battle for centuries. The Romans, masters of adaptation and perfection, were initially slow to adopt this resource. But when they did, as always, they took it to the extreme. Each campaign, each conquered land, brought new influences, including canines. The Roman Empire was a cultural sponge. It absorbed languages, gods, tactics, and dog breeds. When invading regions like Gaul and Britannia, Roman generals noticed something remarkable. Local dogs fought to the death to defend camps. Even when their masters had already fallen, these animals continued to fight. This sparked a new vision in Rome. These dogs were no longer just used for spectacle in the arenas. They were being shaped for war. And so began the improvement of the Canis Pugnax, no longer merely performers, but living, strategic weapons. Before they were seen as soldiers, Roman dogs were stars of the show. In blood-soaked arenas filled with screams and cheers, the Pugnax kennels both enchanted and terrified. They fought bulls, rhinoceroses, prisoners, even gladiators, trained to attack, to sniff, to obey, and more than that, to entertain. Were fed selected meats, kept fit, and cared for like elite athletes. Their value is so high that many owners would rather lose a fortune than see one injured. But this wasn't out of compassion, it was strategy. A dog's reputation was also its owner's. Victory in the arena brought prestige, honor, and millionaires' bets. But over time, Roman generals began to ask if a dog could face a lion. If it could chase a man to death, why not use it in a military campaign? The arena hadn't just created fighters. It had forged warriors worthy of Rome. Yet transforming an arena dog into a battlefield warrior, that was no simple task. The battlefield demanded more than ferocity. It required intelligence, control, and absolute obedience. The Canis Pugnax had to distinguish friend from foe, just by scent, tone of voice, or the sound of armor. That's why their training began early. From the time they were puppies, they lived in close contact with legionnaires. They slept in the camps, ate with the soldiers, and learned to recognize every face in the garrison. They had to understand one thing clearly. Orders from a commander could never be ignored, not even in the chaos of battle. One mistake, one attack on the wrong person, could cost lives. So they were taught short commands, specific sounds, silent gestures. And above all, they learned exactly when to move forward and when to retreat. Unlike barbarian dogs that attacked any stranger, Roman war dogs were disciplined like trained soldiers. They didn't obey by instinct. They obeyed by honor. They were part of the legion, and their presence was as feared as a centurion's blade. To march with a Roman legion was to march through hell with discipline. From sunrise to sunset, Roman soldiers marched up to 35 kilometers a day, carrying shields, spears, food, tents, and their unwavering faith. And at the end of that brutal journey, before they could even rest, they had to clear the land. They dug trenches, erected fences, and built the famous Castra temporary fortified camps. In these vulnerable moments, enemies could be hiding nearby. That's when the dogs came into the picture. Posted at the edges of the camp, they sniffed the air, barked deep warnings, and were always ready to strike. Canis Pugnax were the first to sense something unusual. If an enemy approached at night, he wouldn't make it out. These dogs were like shadows with eyes. While soldiers ate or slept, the dogs stood guard. They were the eyes of the legion in the darkness. And they didn't just protect the camp. They protected the souls of the men. Because they understood something humans often forget. The real danger comes when you let your guard down. Canis Pugnax was not just a guardian. It was a strategy. In campaigns across Gaul, Britannia, and Germania, where thick forests hid threats at every turn, they were more than companions. They were the silent warriors of Rome. Traps were everywhere, and enemies knew every trail. That's why the dogs became essential. They advanced ahead of the scouts, sniffing out traps, tracking hidden enemies. When a group of legionnaires fell into an ambush, the dogs were the first to leap through the bushes, facing spears and axes. Without hesitation, some were let loose wearing bronze-studded leather armor, barking like living thunder, destabilizing enemy lines before the main charge even began. Others were held back, unleashed at the last possible moment as a final, devastating blow in surprise attacks. There are reports of dogs charging alone against entire enemy groups, defending banners, attacking flanks, or standing guard to protect Roman generals in decisive battles. Their psychological impact was as powerful as their bite, because anyone who saw Canis Pugnax charging toward them knew one thing for certain: Rome was coming. The value of a dog often surpassed that of many men. A well-trained Canis Pugnax could determine the outcome of a battle or save an entire legion. Because of this, they were treated as precious assets. Many received special food, daily brushing, and even limb massages after long marches. Their handlers knew if the dog was healthy, the troop was safe. In some cases, these dogs were treated better than slaves, given beds made of fine straw and animal skins. It was common to see them beside officers, as if they were miniature generals attentive to every step, every command. And when they died, they were not buried as ordinary animals. Many received graves worthy of soldiers, with tombstones, inscriptions, and even proper rituals. They were remembered with honor. In the memories of soldiers, they were never just animals. They were brothers in war. Part of the legion, they marched out from Rome and never returned the same. Interestingly, historical records on the use of dogs in Roman legions are few. Writers such as Tacitus mention their presence in military camps, especially in unstable provinces like Germania, Britannia, and Thrace. where the threat of sudden attack was constant. There, dogs served as guardians, trackers, and even assisted in capturing fugitives. But on the battlefield, little was said about them. Poets, playwrights, and historians preferred to glorify the deeds of men's swords, spears, and fiery speeches, while remaining silent about the barking that warned of danger. Perhaps they saw it as too ordinary. Or maybe they believed that associating Rome's glory with animals would diminish its prestige. However, the monuments tell a different story. The Column of Marcus Aurelius, erected in the 2nd century, clearly depicts dogs marching alongside soldiers. They were there. They fought. They stood watch. They died, and even when forgotten by books, they were immortalized in stone, where words fell silent. Images endured in the corridors of time, where emperors have become statues, and soldiers are now just names on dusty scrolls. The dogs of Rome remain almost invisible, yet indispensable. They didn't wield swords, but they knew when to bite. They wore no breastplates, but they protected them like walls. They never sought glory, but they died for it, and that made them unforgettable. Canis Pugnax was a reflection of Rome itself, disciplined, resilient, and fierce. In a world where survival was carved in blood, these dogs didn't just live, they served, loyal to the end, honored as soldiers, loved like children. And when their paws finally came to rest, many were buried among men. Because in the heart of a legionnaire, there was no difference between a comrade with a shield and one with fangs. Rome's war dogs weren't just part of history. They were part of the soul of what made Rome eternal. And when we look back at the nearly forgotten history of the Canis Pugnax, we begin to understand Rome was not built by generals, emperors, and swords alone. It was shaped, too, by silent, loyal, and ferocious creatures. Dogs who crossed forests, marched through deserts, guarded camps, and shed blood on battlefields. And in arenas, they did not speak, but they obeyed with almost supernatural precision. They did not write speeches, but their actions roared louder than any orator. In the Senate, Canis Pugnax came to symbolize something many often forget. The glory of an empire also depends on those who remain in the shadows, protecting while others shine. They were dogs, yes, but in spirit, they were as Romang as any centurion. And by remembering them today, centuries later, we restore a measure of the honor that official records denied them. They lived, fought, and died for Rome. And now, they live again through this story. As long as we tell their tale, they will never be forgotten. If this story moved you in any way, then the mission was accomplished. Because by shedding light on the memory of these forgotten warrior dogs, we also revive a value the modern world seems to have lost: loyalty to the end. And if I've managed to give you something new, something you'd never heard before, repay me with a simple gesture. Leave a like. It tells me that this journey is worth continuing, that it's worth uncovering the stories that books have buried, and more than that, subscribe to the channel. Because transformation begins the moment we choose to see the world with different eyes. Here, you'll discover stories that change the way we view the past and ourselves. This is not just a video. It's a calling. And if you've come this far, it means you already feel like part of this journey. So come with you. There is still so much left to be revealed.